In the news, there are fears of rioting in Panama as official results show the government candidate winning. Secretary of State Baker has begun 2 days of talks in Moscow, and a self-portrait by Picasso sells for almost $48 million. In sports, a night of upsets in the NBA playoffs, and in baseball, last year's Cy Young Award winner picks up his first W. The rain is going to linger a while in the East, and Ellen Abelson looks at Argentina's staggering debt problem. I'm Mary Alice Williams. Deborah Norville is on assignment. This is Wednesday, May 10th.
This is NBC News at Sunrise with Deborah Norville.
There is no solution in sight this morning for Panama's election crisis if, as opposition leaders claim, the vote is a clear call for democracy. It is equally clear that dictator Manuel Noriega isn't listening. Yesterday, more troops were sent in to guard the vote-counting center, where, as NBC's Ed Rabel reports, the first results released by the government show its man is winning.
The official tally showed the pro-Noriega candidate leading by 2-1, despite evidence gathered by independent observers that voters overwhelmingly cast their ballots for the opposition candidate. The government is said to fear rioting when more of the official results are announced. To solve the crisis, Noriega opponents say the government should simply declare their man, Guillermo Endara, the winner.
That's right. I'm acting as president-elect.
Another way to end the crisis, politicians say, is to have the election declared invalid. Both the opposition and the government are said to be considering the plan. To make it work, however, the opposition is believed to be demanding that new elections be held within 6 months, and that the government must provide specific guarantees that there would be no fraud. Ed Rabel, NBC News, Panama.
The Bush administration wants to wait until the official results are in before it decides how to respond to the Panamanian elections. But as NBC White House correspondent Steve Porter tells us, the president is keeping all of his options open.
Will, and without going into who I...
Military action in Panama is on the president's list of options, but he says...
I will not discuss the options of the United States. I will simply, again, call on General Noriega to honor the will of the people.
Although some members of the president's election observer team who met with him in the morning favored a military option, there were also calls for caution from other members of Congress.
I think we need to let the world community first take action towards Mr. Noriega and isolate that regime, but I wouldn't rule out our use of force.
But after giving the president a report on his own personal observations of the Panama election, former President Carter argued against even a show of military force.
There's no doubt in the minds of Panamanian people that the United States military forces are stronger than theirs. And to have an overt display of military force, I think, would probably be what Noriega would like to see.
Officials here believe the huge opposition victory and Noriega's attempt to steal it have immensely discredited him among his own supporters. So the real option for now is to wait and see whether he gives up without a shove from the U.S. military. Steve Porter, NBC News, the White House.
Secretary of State James Baker is in Moscow this morning, ready, he says, to test the full extent of the new Soviet thinking on a wide range of issues. Shortly after his arrival, Baker sat down with Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze. Their talks are expected to cover the situation in Afghanistan, and Moscow's offer to eliminate short-range nuclear missiles in Europe. Baker will meet with Mikhail Gorbachev tomorrow. In this country, House Speaker Jim Wright has launched a spirited defense against 69 charges of congressional misconduct. Yesterday, Wright's lawyers asked for access to committee documents and witnesses, and today they're expected to ask that many of the major charges against the Navy, against him be dropped. The Navy has opened an investigation into an engine room fire aboard the USS White Plains, which killed 6 sailors and injured 5 others. The combat supply ship was in the South China Sea about 100 miles from Hong Kong when the flames broke out. The White Plains is under tow now to the Subic Bay Naval Base in the Philippines this morning. A Navy source says the fire was apparently triggered by a fuel leak in one of the boilers. In other news, there's evidence that a drug designed to smooth out wrinkles may also protect against skin cancer. NBC's Robert Hager now with the latest research on Retin-A.
A year and a half ago, when Retin-A first drew national attention for smoothing over wrinkles, Many dermatologists pointed out that just a few people had been tested over only 4 months' time. Critics wondered if over the long range, Retin-A would continue to work, or could it even cause harm? Now, Retin-A's principal researcher, University of Michigan's Dr. John Voorhees, has told a panel at the National Institutes of Health of 6 new studies of a lot of users over a much longer period. Voorhees showed new slides of people before and after, and said the latest studies offer convincing confirmation of those first early tests.
The results that we found at 4 months got even better at 10 and 22 months. And in addition to that, for the entire 22 months, continued use of the drug caused no relapse of the improvement.
The new results, over the first 10 months of drug use, wrinkles improve. After 10 months, improvements stop. But if treatment continues, wrinkles don't reappear. There was also some evidence that Retin-A works against formation of skin cancers, although conflicting tests in mice only show it could even cause cancer. Still, the human tests show no adverse effects other than some skin irritation, and that seems to get better after the first few months' use. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
And in New York last night, someone paid almost $48 million to buy a self-portrait by Picasso. That's the second highest price ever paid at auction for a single work of art, and more than double what experts had figured it would go for. Yo Picasso was painted in 1901 when the artist was 20 years old. When it was last sold in 1981, the painting brought a relatively modest $5.5 million. The new owner of Yo Picasso is keeping a low profile. Sotheby's auction house refused to identify the buyer or even say which hemisphere he or she lives in. In sports, a night of upsets in the NBA playoffs. Don Criqui has the highlights and the rest of the day of sports when we come back.
Before I started wearing no nonsense, I used to have more nail polish on my pantyhose than on my fingernails. Looks better here, doesn't it?
Pantyhose at last are no nonsense.
You're on your way.
The company that gave me a summer job in Louisiana last year has sent me to Germany this year. And we've got an interesting challenge. Getting a special product to people who need it all over the world. It's used in formulating medical compounds that fight heart disease, high blood pressure, and more. Hard to imagine a college senior working on a project like this. But I found one company willing to give a young person a chance.
I'll let you do great things.
Some drinks have a dark side, a taste that may leave you thirsty. But all-natural Sundance is just fruit juices and sparkling water. No added sugar, no dark side. Sundance puts refreshment in a whole new light.
An upset courtesy of Air Jordan, and the Flyers are staying alive. Don Criqui has the sports. Morning, Don.
Morning, Mary Alice. Couple of upsets. There was no home court advantage last night in the NBA playoffs as Chicago and Golden State scored impressive wins on the road. Michael Jordan was again the prime mover for Chicago in an overtime game at New York. Jordan scored 9 of his game-high 34 points in OT as the Bulls upset the Knicks 120-109 to take their opening game series. It's a best-of-7 play. At Phoenix, Big Manute Bol stuffed his only 2 points of the game, but teammate Chris Mullin scored 37 as Golden State was a victor over the Suns 127-122. Even best-of-7 play at a victory apiece. A college standout, 6'9" J.R. Reed will pass up his senior season at the University of North Carolina to play in the NBA. In Stanley Cup play, the Philadelphia Flyers will be back to play another night against Montreal. The Flyers, 1 game from elimination, came off the ropes to beat the Canadiens at Montreal last night, 2-1. The game was decided 5 minutes into overtime when Dave Poulin of the Flyers got an open shot and put it away. Montreal leads 3-2. Calgary leads the other semifinal series 3-1 over Chicago. Game 5 is at Calgary tonight. The special investigators report on Pete Rose's gambling habits has been turned over to Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti as Rose continues to await a ruling on his future in the game. The wait for his first victory of the season is over for American League Cy Young Award winner Frank Viola of the Twins. The big left-hander was mowing down the Red Sox last night at Fenway, where the Twins beat Boston 6-2. Here he gets Wade Boggs. Viola is now 1-5 this season after finishing 24-7 in 1988. Nelson Liriano of Toronto delivered a big play in the field, taking a base hit from Seattle's Harold Reynolds
but Seattle went on to win that game 4-3. Elsewhere, California has now won 16 of its last 21. The White Sox routed the Brewers. KC's Brett Saberhagen 5-hit Cleveland. The Yankees beat the Rangers 5-3. Roberto Kelly, the Yankee center fielder, had a lot to do with that as he robbed Pete Incaviglia of a 2-run home run with this exceptional play in center field. The Atlanta Braves remain hot. They beat Philadelphia 7-2 for a 6th consecutive win. The Mets were a winner. More on that shortly. The Giants edged the Cubs, and St. Louis beat San Diego. As all good things must, the record errorless streak of Met shortstop Kevin Elster came to an end at Cincinnati. Elster booted a ground ball after going 88 games and 294 chances without an error, a major league mark. The Mets won 3-1. Red Sox catcher Rick Cerone thought he had a pop foul against the Twins, but lo, it had him. Minnesota, as we mentioned, won that game behind Frank Viola, so even the big guys can bungle one.
All right, thank you, Don. A slow-moving storm may go a long way toward solving the drought problems in the east. Joe Whitty's forecast is next on NBC News at sunrise.
If I were going to create the perfect place, I'd start with the north. I would carve out rivers and rolling hills, then ride the moon south and warm the skies with a tropical sun. I would dot the west with little hometowns and fill the east with excitement. Right in the middle, I'd put a great big playground. I would surround it all with water from coast to coast to coast, and I'd give it a name, Florida.
Have you ever wondered what a baggage handler might take on vacation? What everyone should take. Samsonite's glutton for punishment.
For Post Natural Bran Flakes, John Newcomb on getting the best out of life.
Staying on top requires a good serve, strong approach, and a great put away.
Reach for the best tasting high fiber Bran Flake. Post Bran Flakes at their best.
America's national forests are really wonderful places to get away to get a little elbow room when the city starts squeezing you in. Why not come and see the miracle for yourself? Get involved with Forests for Us.
We'd be glad to have you.
Used to be, the questions asked in this room were about spelling and geography. Today, the questions are a lot tougher. Jimmy, where did you get those bruises? Johnny, are you high on something? Mary, are you pregnant? There's a lot more to teaching today than the 3 R's. And the more you know how complex and difficult teaching has become, the more you know that teachers deserve all the respect and support we can give them.
Rough, wet weather continuing this morning. Joe Whitty has the forecast. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Mary Alice. Good morning, everyone. The wet weather pattern is now sliding into the mid-Atlantic. Flooding will be a major problem over the next 3 to 5 days. The atmosphere locking into an unmovable blocking pattern, a headlock on the northeast. And this jet stream pattern is called an omega block because it takes on the shape of the Greek letter omega. This is equivalent to a huge atmospheric traffic jam. So rain clouds over the east will continue to swirl for the next 4 to 5 days. We expect some heavy rains here, and watch for some thunderstorms down in the southeast and the northern Rockies. That's a quick look at the national weather. Now here's what's happening in your part of the world. Denver, 74 degrees for a high today. Chicago, 62, and sunny. Minneapolis, great with 76 degrees. Dallas, 79, at Miami, 86. Much more later. Mary Alice?
Thank you, Joe. And when we come back, Alan Abelson on Argentina's huge money problems.
I'm Bryant Gumbel. Later this morning on Today, parenting from the father's perspective.
I'm Jane Pauley. Also, Jim Fowler looks at exotic animals, and John Provost from Lassie.
Later this morning on Today.
Mississippians have a special spirit, all their own. A sense of pride, accomplishment, and genuine concern for their neighbors that shows in the way they live every day. Hear their stories as we introduce you to one of these special people every Thursday night on WTVA News. And if you know of someone who should be honored, write us at WTVA, P.O. Box 350, Tupelo, Mississippi 38802, as we continue to find and recognize the people who live the spirit of Mississippi.
Mississippi on WTVA.
Here are some of the stories we're watching this Wednesday morning on NBC News at sunrise. The situation grows more tense in Panama amid new charges of vote fraud and fear of riots. The White House is considering action to protect the Panama Canal. And in business news, Pan Am may merge with Northwest Airlines. Details coming up. George Bush will undergo his first physical exam as president this morning. Mr. Bush, who says he's never felt better, is going to Bethesda Naval Hospital outside Washington for a routine checkup. The White House says the 4-hour exam will include everything from chest x-rays to hearing tests. Choosing the right doctor is a matter of great importance to many Americans, and especially to those who don't have a physician they see on a regular basis. How do people find a doctor they can go to with confidence, whose professional standing and experience ensure the best possible care? This morning on America's Vital Signs, Roger O'Neill reports on a new approach born of frustration and anxiety.
There's any potatoes in those ears. Huh? Let's see, I see one.
Finding good medical care has usually been a chancy affair. Americans see a doctor or dentist a billion times a year. One medical journal found 64% are not satisfied with their doctor. Some are even disgusted.
Most doctors just want to get you in and get you out so they can get another patient in there. And they really don't give a damn about whether they help you or not.
We don't know where to go to find a doctor. We don't know what questions to ask. And we certainly don't know who to trust.
Joe Tallman lost trust in doctors when his daughter Jessica developed brain seizures. In 2 years, the little girl saw 15 doctors. Some wanted to remove half of her brain. Finally, she was cured with medicine. Tallman knew there had to be a better way to find a doctor than relying on friends or the yellow pages.
Prolog, this is Jerry. May I help you find a doctor? Yes.
Tallman now runs a company which tries to match patients with doctors.
I'm looking for a family doctor with very good bedside manners. Let me pull up the doctor's bio here, give you some personal information on the practice.
Consumers can find out about a doctor's education, his religion, hobbies, office hours, and what he charges. Comments from patients who have already seen the doctor are also available through the service.
You can ask them questions that you would not go into a doctor's office and ask the doctor face-to-face for fear of either offending him or looking stupid.
They already have some good, substantial information about me and the way I practice medicine before they even meet me. Whoa, what's that?
Doctors or hospitals sponsoring them pay a $35 to $100 fee for each new patient. There is no charge to consumers. Some hospitals, like this one, offer their own referral service, but listings are limited to staff physicians. Prolog operates in 8 cities and has files on 8,200 doctors. But it is not a guarantee to good health care. The company gets all of its information from doctors, and it relies on their integrity for accuracy. Doctors can lie. One physician said he had never been convicted of malpractice, when in fact he had. That doctor has now been removed from the list. But 95% of the people who called the company say they are happy with the doctor they visited. Prolog has successfully tapped the market, helping people choose a doctor, where in the past, there was little opportunity to make an informed choice. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Boulder, Colorado.
More news, the weather for travelers, and we'll give you the business next. Panama's presidential election is our top story again today. Military strongman Manuel Noriega's handpicked candidate is denouncing U.S. charges of election fraud. Official tallies show Carlos Duque leading by a 2-to-1 margin despite independent observers' evidence that most people voted for the opposition candidate. Panamanian officials, who reportedly fear rioting when further results are announced, placed additional troops on duty this morning. One of the United States' chief concerns is, of course, the Panama Canal. Under terms of a 1977 treaty, the United States is to turn control of the canal over to Panama in 1999. Some members of Congress are calling for legislation to abrogate that treaty, but most are urging caution.
And that we must be careful to separate the issue of Noriega's departure from threats with regard to the treaty or the operation of the canal. For the moment, the canal is able to operate.
The White House is said to be considering military force as one possible response to the vote fraud, but officials say that any invasion of Panama is unlikely. Residents of South Boston were terrorized by a gunman firing shots from a low-flying plane last night. Police say the man commandeered the small plane after killing his estranged wife. No one on the ground was injured as the man sprayed shots from an assault rifle for more than an hour. He was captured after landing at Logan Airport with only 5 minutes worth of fuel left. The music world is mourning the death of Keith Whitley this morning. The rising young star of country music was found dead yesterday at his home in suburban Nashville. Coroners say he died of accidental alcohol poisoning, although traces of cocaine and Valium were also found in his system. A possible merger of two of the nation's airline giants tops our business news this morning. Pan Am is considering a bid for NWA, the parent corporation of Northwest Airlines. Pan Am would reportedly be backed by two insurance companies, Prudential and Equitable, and a group of Texas investors headed by the Bass brothers. The stock market recorded its 8th loss in a row as bond prices plunged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 5 points to close at 2,371.33. Standard & Poor's 500 stock index dropped less than a point to 305.19. The Shearson-Lehman long-term Treasury bond index was lower, but in London this morning, U.S. long bonds were higher than yesterday's close in New York. Looking ahead to today's market day, here's the Wall Street Journal's Tom Herman. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Mary Alice.
What is moving the market along this roller coaster, all the markets?
Mainly interest rates, which have been going up all week. The big problem is all this borrowing the government is doing. They have to borrow nearly $29 billion this week, and that's been driving rates back up.
What's coming today that would drive interest rates further?
Today, the Treasury has to sell 10-year notes. A lot of people I just spoke to in London are afraid that investors don't want to buy 10-year notes. The interest rate is only going to be about 9% or a little bit higher. A lot of investors say, why buy 10-year notes? I can get the same return on 6-month Treasury bills.
Are the economic indicators expected out this week likely to be good news or bad news?
Probably bad news, and that's another reason why people are afraid of higher interest rates. We're going to have retail sales tomorrow. That's expected to show strong growth, and therefore people will worry about inflation. And then on Friday, the producer price report, which is expected to show sharply higher inflation.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Tom Herman of the Wall Street Journal. The dollar lost ground in early European trading. It's down against the Japanese yen, off against the West German mark, and also lower against the British pound. The price of gold at 9 a.m. in London was $378 an ounce. That's down 80 cents from yesterday's close in New York. Alan Abelson is next with a look at the financial mess in Argentina after this.
Who could ask for anything more?
Ask him if it has a 5-speed transmission like Isuzu.
Does it have a 5-speed transmission? Well, I'm going to check on that.
Ask him if it has a bigger payload than Isuzu.
Ignore him?
Or better mileage.
Does it? Not exactly. No!
Ask him why it costs hundreds more than Isuzu.
Now you can save up to $1,000 on the Isuzu pickup during Isuzu's 75th birthday blowout.
Tropicana Pure Premium Orange Juice has only one ingredient, so no other major brand comes closer to this than this. Now, what are you waiting for? Try it. Oh yes, there is one other thing. Pure Premium now comes in a slightly larger package. 96 ounces, to be exact.
Mornings are always crazy in my house. Somehow, I make it to breakfast. Today, Mom is putting potatoes in the toaster, or Rita toaster hash browns. Now I can have real potatoes for breakfast and still make the school bus on time.
I believe in pantyhose I can count on. You know, like 5 wearings, 6 wearings.
Pantyhose that last are no nonsense.
Of all the threats to stability in South America, perhaps the most pernicious is its economy. Argentina has labored under inflation and interest rates so staggering neither the International Monetary Fund nor the World Bank will help, and their coffers of foreign money are empty. Alan Abelson has some thoughts on that. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Mary Alice.
Fundamentals. How did Argentina get here?
Well, I think they had a bunch of generals and admirals who weren't very good at fighting wars, but they were even worse at governing a country. And what they did basically was they imported a lot of money. They borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, hundreds of, well, altogether they owe about $70 billion to the rest of the world. And that money, instead of going into something productive, like, let's say, a new plant of some sort or another, actually went for consumer goods. It kept the population happy, but it also laid the seeds, it seems to me, of what we're seeing now, which is the most disrupted economy in the world.
Elections coming up next week.
That's right.
The Peronists seem to have the upper hand at this point. They're right-wing. Well, what will they do fiscally?
Well, they're right-wing, but they're populist. And a part of Argentina's present trouble goes back to Perón, because he did everything pretty much to keep in power. And, bread and circuses were his business, and that's exactly what these guys will do, too. They'll make a bad situation impossible.
What would the next government have to do to get back in the good graces of the IMF and the World Bank?
Well, they'd have to really face their problems, and it's a very ugly kind of thing to have to do. What they'd have to do, for instance, is probably fire about 1/4 to 1/3 of the government workers. They're overloaded with people on the payroll. They'd have to get rid of all the state-owned losing businesses. They'd have to settle down and try and really get their export business going again. This is an extraordinarily rich country, but for some reason, as we've talked about, the country has really, just gone to the dogs.
If they don't do it, is that country ripe for revolution?
Oh, I'm sure that you'll have all kinds of trouble in Argentina if they don't do it. You'll have food riots. You'll have all kinds of economic problems. You can't just keep borrowing and having a good time, unfortunately. I wish you could, but you can't. And I think Argentina's got to pay the price.
Okay, thank you very much, Alan. Alan Abelson. Travelers in this country are in for tough transit today. Joe Whitty has his umbrella out.
Thanks, Mary Alice. I expect numerous delays in several areas. In the west, thunderstorms may cause delays places like Salt Lake City and Billings. In the east, shuttle flights between Boston, New York, and Washington, delays. And in the southeast, threat of severe thunderstorms for parts of Charleston and Jacksonville, Florida. Now, for the Great Lakes, Mississippi Valley, beautiful sunny skies. And this dry weather will give the Corn Belt farmers a chance to plant the last half of the crop. But in the long run, rain is needed in this central portion of the country. That's my latest. Have a safe trip. Mary Alice?
Thanks, Joe. Residents of the tiny town of Sunol, California are saying that maybe Sunday night's fire was a blessing in disguise. It destroyed the town's only gas station, along with a few cars, but it may have put the rustic San Francisco Bay Area community of about 1,500 people on the map. If it hadn't been for the fire, they say, no one in the outside world would have known that Sunol's mayor is a dog, a black lab to be specific. No word yet on what he thought of the fire. That's the latest from NBC News at sunrise at 1/2 past the hour this morning. I'm Mary Alice Williams, NBC News, New York.